Okay, great. Thanks very much for your kind introduction, also invitation, Aidan and colleagues. So the idea is to give you a taste as to what your journey could potentially look like if you start research early on in your medical or scientific careers. So I've used myself as an illustration because I've actually taken a rather convoluted route, which I'll show you a bit later. And also some of our students, both from Kenton Medway Medical School, Hong Kong and other parts of the world, have also joined our mentorship program. So you're all very welcome to join. The idea is to have a student-centric program where you'll be mentored and have the opportunities to lead studies and get it published. So I know, for all of your job applications as an F1, or whether it's your sort of post Bachelor of Science degree programs, you need to get some papers and track record for your PhD applications. So we're trying to help you all by having, setting targets and achieving what you want to achieve. So as you can see here, I've got multiple affiliations. So I'm based in Hong Kong at the moment, but I also have an appointment in mainland China, where we have got several extensive collaborations, and also I've kept a visiting appointment at the Kenton Medway Medical School. So the topic is actually career paths and leading cardiovascular research as a medical student. But increasingly, we started off doing cardiovascular science, but we've extended it to cardio-oncology, so cancer medicine. So, so even if you want to join other specialties in the, other than cardiology, you're very welcome to lead studies that look at the relationship between cardiovascular disease or cardiovascular medications and outcomes for other specialties. So, for example, we have papers on fracture risk. We've got papers on frailty. We've got papers on patients who attend family medicine cohorts. So these are lower risk subjects. So if you want to be a GP, you want to be an orthopedic surgeon, there is actually still a project for you to join us. So we've got two aims for this talk. So firstly is to discuss established career paths for academic medicine if you're based in the UK, and I want to share some of my own experience as to how to navigate through the system. And secondly, I want to provide an overview of the research activities of our research groups, focusing on the student-led initiatives and also achievements. So we actually set up 3 ventures: the Cardiovascular Analytics Group, which focuses on cardiovascular research, as the name suggests, but increasingly, because we've recruited additional investigators from other specialties, including cancer medicine and also surgeons, we've actually rebranded as well as the Healthcare Analytics Group. So that essentially covers all medical and surgical specialties. And finally, we do have an international health informatics study network, which focuses on meta-analysis and systematic reviews. If that's what you want to do, it's actually not a bad idea to start off writing review articles or doing systematic reviews. These articles are often very good ways to attract citations earlier on in your career. So it builds up your track record and also builds up your H index in time. So firstly, career paths. So this is lifted from the Medical Schools Council website. Essentially, depending on the sort of medical program you're joining, so it could be a graduate program, in which case it'll be 4 years. If you join a traditional medical program, like the one in Kenton Medway Medical School, it consists of 5 years. And if you go to certain schools, like Imperial or Cambridge or Oxford, and some other schools where you have intercalated degrees as a compulsory year, then you've got 6 years of medical school. So for those people who already know that you're into medical research, you can actually opt to do an intercalated master's degree and also intercalated doctoral degree, where there's doctor medicine, or it could be a PhD program. Just note that there is difference in terminology. So in the UK, MD is actually a higher level program, but if we talk about MD PhD programs, it's often the terminology from the US and Canada, where they have MD as a qualified medical degree. So when you talk about MD PhDs, it's actually a basic medical degree plus a PhD. So in the UK, after 6 years of medical school, you typically join foundation year 1, where you rotate through several specialties, and then after that you actually get full registration with the GMC. But if you want to stay in the UK, you actually have to complete a second year to get your approved practice settings lifted, where you're only eligible to practice independently and also join various specialty programs after getting your FY2. So I actually left after FY1, so I'll tell you a little bit more about it later, where when I went back to the UK, it created some difficulties in coming back in the system, because technically I hadn't completed FY2 in the UK. I did do the equivalent of that in Hong Kong, mainland China, but it's very difficult to get it approved and retrospectively counted. There is an option to do your FY2 year abroad, but you have to get your permission in advance from your foundation school, but they often only approve that under very special circumstances, and there are maybe only 1 to 2 places where that can become accredited. So it's extremely difficult to get your FY2 accredited if you do it abroad. And then after that, you can opt to be a GP, and it takes a further 3 years. Or if you do medical or surgical specialties, it takes up to 8 years. So you hear often people talk about being a CMT1, so core medical trainee 1, or surgical trainee, and then you can actually go up to registrar level, where you become ST9 or ST8. So that basically means you've got 8 or 9 years post FY2. So actually these doctors are still being classified as junior doctors because it's below the rank of the consultant, but then these doctors are already very, very senior and very experienced. And it's just the UK terminology where it arbitrarily divides doctors into consultants and junior doctors. And you also have some associate specialist grades, but these are often recruited doctors from other parts of the world. So they technically have a specialist qualification, maybe in their own country, or they may or may not have that accredited in the UK, but they haven't joined the consultant ranks. So if you want to do academic research, you can join at any point of the process. So the route I have described on the left-hand side, shown in the green diagram, is your non-academic route. But there are very flexible ways in the UK where you can jump back and forth between the pure clinical and academic clinical programs on the right-hand side. So if you want to do academia early on, you can. That's exactly what I did. I did an integrated PhD, and I also did an integrated bachelor's. I didn't actually get a place for academic FY1, so don't worry if you don't get that on your CV. If you get it, it's very, very good, because it's very competitive to get it. But if you don't get it, it's not the end of the world, actually. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. It might be better if you actually get some clinical experience. The problem with the academic foundation program is that you actually lose 6 months of clinical training, because you get 6 months of protected time to do academic research. And the downside, obviously, is that you need to make up your skills and experience in a much shorter amount of time. And also you have to get all your sign-offs outside of the academic protected time. So after FY2, you can get a clinical fellowship to do a PhD or an MD. So MD is basically a medical PhD, you can think of it that way. It's reserved for physicians. But if you want to do something basic science related, you should opt for a PhD. But there are increasingly PhD programs that are clinically oriented. So you can do a PhD in epidemiology. So the terminology is a little bit mixed up nowadays. And traditionally, you can the PhD programs are full-time, whereas MDs can be full-time or part-time. So that's also a distinction there. If you're more experienced, let's say you already have a PhD or an MD sometime after FY2, then you can actually get a clinical lectureship where you spend typically 50 to 75%, don't quote me on the numbers, on clinical training, but at the same time you get maybe 25% time to do medical research. So let's say you get a clinical lectureship at, I'm trying to think, at London Deanery, then you probably spend a day a week at the lab of a local professor in that training program. So further along, let's say you've done that, let's say you've got your MRCP, you've got your MRCS or equivalent, then you can actually spend more time research. So here you can apply for a clinical scientist program. So you can apply to Wellcome Trust, you can apply to Medical Research Council, you can apply to BBSRC. Various funders actually have monies for that purpose. So you can actually get this process as shown here before or after CCT. So you can get that at various stages post membership exam. So, but it might be better to do it, you know, once you've selected specialty. So let's say that you already have a number in medicine or even in cardiology, then at least your career path is secure. Then you know that your PhD is going to be in a relevant in a relevant area that's geared towards a medical career. So I actually did my PhD all the way back here. So that really gives you an edge potentially. You can start research earlier on, but the downside is that you get paid much less. So if you intercalate it here, you get paid at the very, very basic rate, which is probably around 18,000 a year. Whereas if you intercalate your PhD or do your PhD around registrar level, then you get your clinical pay being protected. You won't get extra banding, but you'll probably get these 30, 34, 36 or 38K equivalent for your PhD training. So that's something to think about. But if one is not a big issue and you don't feel that you want to go into clinical practice yet, then it's perfectly okay to do it earlier on. And then after CCT, so let's say you're already a qualified neurologist or qualified GP, then you can actually apply for more senior positions. So typically in the UK, you've got the ranks of lectureship, which is the most junior, but already is a substantive rank. So typically, if you have a clinical research fellow appointment, that's usually below the lectureship. But again, the terminology can get a little bit mixed up. Essentially, if you're on the substantive rank, you can get lectureship, senior lectureship, readership, and then full professor. So if you get into academia post CCT and you have either an MD or PhD, then you typically join as a senior lecturer. Or if you join the pure clinical route, let's say you already have a cardiology CCT, you can actually usually get a honorary appointment as an honorary clinical senior lecturer. But it just means that your post is still substantively with the NHS, but not be paid for by the university. Whereas all the positions, apart from the FY 1 and 2, these are usually positions that are paid for by the university, and they get some reimbursement from the NHS for the clinical times that the academic staff members do in the hospital or in the local council. So my position, for example, I was reading at the University of Kent, so 2 days a week or 3 days a week, it was actually my work with Medway Council. So they reimburse the University of Kent for some of the doing public health related works. So very, very flexible. So I've actually done a very, very convoluted route into academia. So it's really not the best way to do it. I wouldn't recommend any of you doing it, but if you somehow, if you trained in law and could join medicine later on, or if you've done all sorts of interesting things, it's still a good possible to build a career. So I started medical school in 2005. So I've divided my time into studying and doing actual jobs. So studying, I started preclinical medicine at Cambridge in 2005. 3 years later, I did an intercalated PhD in electrophysiology of the heart. And then I went back to clinical medicine at Imperial. And then at the same time, I was an FY1 trainee. I started a public health program because I thought I might eventually go into population health. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about public health and had no idea. So the easiest way to just do a part-time degree. So I did that with the University of Manchester. And after that, I thought, oh, it's vaguely interesting. So I did something more related to management. So I did healthcare management degree at UNSW in the US. And then after that, I wanted to focus my time back into clinical and epidemiology research. So I did an MD degree at Cambridge also. So you can actually do these things remotely and offline. So so you don't necessarily have to take time out. So that's why I put these things in parallel. So I did all of these programs post MBBS when I was actually holding full-time positions. So after FR1 training, I had a very, very steep learning curve. I actually went and teach at the University of Hong Kong for a year. So I was a non-clinical assistant professor. So I was teaching biochemistry, teaching physiology, basically the preclinical parts of the program. So you can imagine, because here, experience-wise, I wasn't that clinically experienced. So my portfolio was mainly focusing on basic science. And then after that, I took up a assistant professorship that was clinical. So it's very similar to the clinical lectureship in the UK. Essentially, it's an academic position, but it allows you to build up your research capacity. It also allows you to enroll in postgraduate medical training at the same time. And then after that, so it was a 3-year appointment. I finished that in Hong Kong and then went to mainland China, actually, to become a cardiac electrophysiology fellow. So essentially, I was doing some registrar work in cardiac EP. And then very, very fortunately, because of my research portfolio, I was actually appointed a full professorship quite early on. So that was back in 2000, I can't remember when it was now, 2020 or 2019. And then after spending some time in, so all of this was in China, I actually went back to the UK. And the reason was that the Kent and Medway Medical School was a new venture. I did my schooling in Kent for many years before I started university. So I actually lived in Kent for 7 years already before that. And because I was quite excited about the medical school, I went back to the UK, and I wanted to take a break from China as well. It's so it's good to move around a little bit. But the problem of that going back between systems is that the things that you do in one country might not get fully recognized, and that's partly the reason why I went into public health. Because if I were to go back into cardiology, then it's very difficult to get my experience accredited, especially the things that I did in mainland China. So in Hong Kong, it would have been relatively simpler because we still follow partly follow the UK system, but all the things you do in mainland China would be very, very difficult to get accredited. So I imagine it'd be quite similar if you go to places other than US and Canada. So you have to think about that. I think moving between the UK and Australia is relatively straightforward. It seems to be quite welcoming UK grads, at least 5 years ago, but now it's probably saturating their own jobs. So I don't know how favourable they're looking towards UK grads going to Australia these days. But then recently, so after 2022, I got another appointment as a full professor in Hong Kong. So I went back, and then I also kept my appointment in mainland China, where they also promoted me because of my research activities. So more about you then. I know it's a lot of experience from me, but I want to show you what you can actually achieve if you start early. It's extremely competitive these days to get anywhere. So even getting academic FY1 position, I know 1 or 2 students actually had at least 50 publications in the UK, and obviously that candidate got the FY1 job. And also for CMP jobs, if you want to have a good training position in a good regional deanery, let's say you want to join a very competitive deanery like Central London, these candidates often have a lot of publications on their CVs and also a lot of experiences beyond what's required. So if you don't have these things, you would definitely lose out. So in terms of getting into specialty programs, again, if you want to do cardiology in London, it's almost impossible to get into a program without having either an MD or PhD. So even a master level degree probably doesn't add so much now. I think all the registrars in London already have PhDs these days. In my time, you can still get into a specialty program that's competitive like cardiology without a PhD, but you're expected to do it as part of your training. So all the people that I knew, even my own mentor, he did a clinical fellowship at Royal Brompton as part of his training. So in terms of our research group, I actually set this up in 2015. It was meant only for local graduates. So it was only for people in my institution, but then we gradually had people asking us, oh, can we join, because we don't have any supervisors at our universities, or we get ignored. So I said, well, why not, you can join us. So now we've converted this platform as an open for all. So we promote collaborations. So even if you don't have any experience, or you're not from the UK or China, you're still very, very welcome to join us. So these are our core values. We promote open research. So you don't have to get my permission or anybody's permission to interact with or collaborate with other colleagues. We also promote research integrity. So you probably heard stories where, you know, people as students get involved in research projects. So you do all the groundwork, but then suddenly when they decide to write the papers, they somehow don't include you. So we don't do that. So we tell people very early on that if you get involved in this, you get, you know, you'll be in a third co-author, or if you lead this, you'll be a first author. So things like that. We make this very clear. And I know that you need these papers or conference proceedings on your track record. So as my old boss said, if you're not named on a publication or on the abstract, you didn't do the work, even if you did. So there's no point in saying that you've, you know, done 3 or 4 research attachments, but you haven't got any track record to show. Then there's no point really showing it. People might actually even question, you know, what did you do in those, you know, 4 attachments. So we cover 3 main types of research. So we did preclinical research. That's mainly based in Tianjin in mainland China, but we also do some clinical and epidemiological research where we look at population-based risk stratification studies or predictive studies. And we also do systematic reviews and meta-analyses. And we've got members here. I know I said 4 countries, but we've got people from more than, I think, 15 or 20 countries now. And we have many PIs who collaborate with us from all over the world. So it's relatively easy for us to build a multi-center or multinational study for that reason. So these are some of the collaborating institutions. So we have institutions from mainland China, from Hong Kong, from Canada, from Brazil, US, Liverpool, East Anglia, and Kent, of course, and Surrey. So if you know any mentors who are interested, you know, please put them in touch. We can set up collaborations. We're very, very open about it, so we don't say no to any potentially new collaborators. So research direction. So these are the 3 things that we focus on at the moment. So we build studies that are based on registries. So that's a traditional method of, you know, patient recruitment, going through the case files and building a database. But with, you know, larger databases of electronic health records, we can, you know, do studies based on big data approaches. So we can build. So for example, in the UK, you've got the CPRD, that's the primary care database. You've got the THIN database. You've got the UK Biobank. You can actually build a study very quickly based on existing data that have already been collected, whether it's for clinical purposes or whether it's for administrative purposes or whether it's for research purposes. And based on some of these data sets, we can also do some economic analyses. So these are the various research areas that we offer. So we started off doing a lot of cardiac electrical physiology. That's from my own background, but we do work on diabetes, we do work on health economics, we do work on medications, we do work on COVID-19 and other infectious diseases. We do work on frailty and geriatrics, GP. We're starting to do more genetic studies now. Now that I'm actually studying a master's in genetics myself, we focus also on heart failure and also on systematic reviews. So these are the achievements of our students and colleagues. So for example, Christian here, he was an undergraduate when he joined us, and he was presenting in many European conferences when he went back to the UK. Ishan was a student from Hong Kong. He is still a student, and he also presented at ESC. So again, you can see that we all have fun. So part of the perks of doing research earlier on is that you can probably get some funding, or your supervisor can help get some funding to go to these exciting conferences. So, you know, during the course of 1 year, I've flown to Thailand, Munich. This is probably still Thailand, Canada, Europe, and of course within mainland China itself as well. So plenty of opportunities to travel. And I think if you have lead authorships in some studies, then your medical schools are definitely more receptive to paying you, a few £100 or £1,000 to travel. Whereas if you just want to go to a conference, you probably won't get funded. So because of COVID, we've switched the mode of working to online pretty much now. So you can see here we often have a multinational meeting. We've got colleagues from all over the world where we talk about research studies and how to collaborate. So plenty of open platforms for discussions. So these are some students and colleagues from Kenton, Hong Kong. So these are the various studies that we have. So we have around 230 ongoing studies at the moment on conditions that I already told you about. So rare cardiovascular diseases, COVID-19, diabetes, GP cohorts, drug cohorts. So we can find a study that fits you or your intended research direction, even if it's outside cardiovascular research. So we also promote gender equity. So we don't favor one gender over another or colleagues from one country over another. So you can see here we have rather diverse group of colleagues. So it's shown it's shown on the network here. We got physicians and doctors and students from North America, South America, Europe, Asia, etc. And the way that we do our studies, we actually put the focus on the student. So often research groups are run based on the directions of the main PI, but we actually put the student first. So whatever study you want to lead, we try to find ways for you to do that study. Let's say you come to me and you say you want to look at fracture risk in elderly, then we try to build you a cohort or try to build you a study and support you in ways that then you can focus on the writing, you can focus on the analysis, where we give you all the back-end support as well. So rather different from what people do. So often PIs get students to do the most boring and the most sort of mind-numbing works. Actually, I probably do most of that. So I'm responsible for getting the data. I'm responsible for building the slides, and the students can actually do the higher order thinking that's involved, which is intended. So I think it works very well. Students often have brighter ideas or come across a paper that I haven't considered. So always welcome new ideas. Again, our research mentorship program was published and advertised in the ESC Asia as well. Yep, so we try to help you on all of the aspects. So often if you're joining as an undergraduate a research group, you're probably just given data entry tasks. But for us, we try to build you in terms of the skill set that you need to lead a project. So all the aspects of project management we help you, or we'll give you some training on. So we're trying to get you writing some funding proposals. We're trying to get you to write manuscripts. We teach you some stats, or if you don't know any, we get some data scientists to support you. Coding and programming, I'm afraid I can't give you any training. Often students can actually learn these themselves. So some of our team members know R and Python. I still use Visual Basic and Stata, so I'm very old. But if you're young and energetic, you can develop your own programming skills. So we give support on building databases. We help to ensure data compliance by de-identifying and anonymizing the data before we give you the data set. We help apply for the ethics approval, and we also get you thinking or writing around the project ideas and the study design. So these are the members from different countries. So we've got people from Canada, Brazil, China, Cyprus, Greece, etc., etc. So if your country is not listed, please join us. Then we can make it even more diverse. And in terms of diversity for the students' background, unfortunately, it's always been quite medically oriented, because I started off as a medic, but we also welcome students from non-medicine backgrounds, so allied health, such as nursing, physiotherapy and pharmacy. If you have experience in computer science and data science, we can do more of the engineering side of things. So we can look at data processing, bow signal processing. And also we've got 1 or 2 colleagues from social science. So these are some of the track records of our students. So this is our undergraduate student who, during the course of 3 or 4 years, she already published around 100 papers. So that's probably the best record so far globally. We haven't set that officially, but just in case there are even more driven colleagues, but I think it's probably one of the top achievers globally. But it's very common these days, so it's increasingly common. So one applicant I heard from one of our students is that he or she already got like 60 papers as an F1. That person's not connected to with our group, so you can see how stiff the competition is. So it's often good to build a theme of research. So as shown here, our colleagues' research is based on diabetes. So we do all sorts of interesting things looking at laboratory predictors. We also build some machine learning models to see how to improve risk stratification. So very, very hands-on, very, very impactful as well. And then we also have track record in Brugada syndrome, so one of the congenital arrhythmic syndromes. Again, we are quite aware that we should get students to lead. So you can see here, our students are often the lead authors, and they are actually undergraduates. So don't feel that as an undergraduate you can't achieve much. You can actually achieve more than a first year or final year PhD student. So don't let the age and the juniority in terms of years of experience put you off. There's no way why you can't get this sort of track record on your CVs as well, provided you put the time and effort in it. Yeah, so our student Sharon also presented in Czech Republic. So unfortunately, she didn't get to fly because the conference was based in Europe, but there were flying restrictions in Hong Kong. So otherwise, she would have loved to have flown to the Czech Republic as well. Yeah, so the reason why I've shown this slide is that you can actually collaborate with our data scientists and machine learning colleagues. So they have very much experience in data science and engineering, so they can actually improve the impact of your paper. Let's say you have no idea and I have no idea how to do machine learning. We can actually take that paper up a notch and get our friends to develop machine learning algorithms for us. So we also took the advantage of the COVID epidemic. So we published very, very high impact studies. So this is one of the highest impact journals in gastroenterology. We also publish in Nature's MPJ Digital Medicine. It's not on here. Oh, there's actually some top right, sorry. And also publish in leading journals like Journal of Hypertension. So you can actually build impactful papers. Obviously, not every paper we publish is high impact. So depending on the trend at the moment and the work that you do. So these are the track records and how long it took to build a track record. Just have a look. You can actually see here, most students only had 4 years of experience with us, but they already have, say, Sharon's one of the exceptional individuals, is 100-ish papers in 4 years. Jandong, he's actually a PhD student who's graduated, but still he still had around 100 papers. So Keith and Danny, another 2 students from the UK, they only started 4 years ago, and 1 year ago they already have 40 and 8 papers if you like the metrics. So just to show you the achievements that you can make actually. So here Christian, he's graduated, he's already a core medical trainee in Oxford, so he's had around 50 papers. So I think having the experience would at least help you to some extent to get into a competitive deanery. So Teddy is actually a pharmacy student turned medical student, so he's also got around 30 papers. And Chakto here, she actually joined us in high school. So she joined us in year 13, and she already started writing about machine learning reviews actually. So don't feel that you don't know much. So if anything, I believe personally I knew more maths back when I was in high school than now actually. So don't lose that, and don't feel that you can't achieve much with without the knowledge. Yeah, we also have doctors and other medical students. So again, the track records are very good. So these are all things that you can do even if you join as a third-year medical student. It's never too late, actually. So obviously, it's much better if you join in high school. Then we've got these 7 years to build up your CV to make it perfect. But even if you join as a final year, there's still no reason why you can't get at least one to two papers before you graduate. So often our projects have a lot of stages. So some projects are near completion. So if there are studies that we need revising, if you want to get a quick paper that you can help with the revision and the reanalysis, that's often quicker than building your own paper. But you can do both, actually. So whilst you're helping other people's studies and get a co-author paper, you can lead a paper and get it published as a first author in 2 years' time, something. So these are some of the achievements of a student. So they've all gone either building a multinational study, or they've actually won Young Investigator Awards as a medical student. So all of these are possibilities. So we have a monthly meeting. I'll show you the slides later on. You're most welcome to join us. So the meeting's actually in 2 hours' time. It's our first meeting, but don't feel free, you have to join this one. Just have a look and have a think and see what you want to achieve. We also have many international partners. So I'm actually the secretary of the International Society of Electrocardiology. So we have many physicians who are into arrhythmia research and clinical practice. So I'm also on the committee for the China Cardio-Oncology Network. So again, if you want to look at the adverse cardiovascular side effects of cancer medications, then we have a lot of studies on that. And we also have lots of young communities where they're driven and managed by young members. Yeah, so don't feel that you have to be at least a certain level of seniority before starting research. So some of these people on the committees, they're already medical students, but when they join, so in terms of systematic reviews, I wouldn't recommend doing a lot of them because it gives people the impression that it's not original studies, but it's very good for attracting citations, very good to learn about research methodology. It's very good to learn about how to critically appraise a study. So for colleagues that start off with our research group, I always recommend them doing several systematic reviews. And at times you can actually publish in high impact journals. So Stroke is one of the top tier journals in neurology. Metabolism, one of the highest impact journals in endocrinology and metabolism. Obviously, International Journal of Cardiology is a quartile 1 or 2 journal in cardiology as well.